Hugo Dobson. Hugo joins us from the UK. He's a professor at the University of Sheffield. He's a specialist in Japan's international relations. Hugo, welcome to the programme. So what do you put Shinzo Abe's longevity down to?
Well, I think there's probably three factors that you need to take into account in understanding his longevity. I think, first of all, it's his relationship with the Japanese legislature. Now, his predecessors faced what was called a twisted diet. Basically, they didn't have control of both houses and couldn't get their programme of legislation through. Abe has won a series of landslide elections, which has opened up the legislature and allowed him to put it through the parliament. Secondly, I think you've got to look at his position within as Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office. He's strengthened the position of the Prime Minister within Japan, bringing loyalists into closer ranks within the government, making a prime ministerial executive very, very strong, stronger than we've seen in Japan previously. And I think the third reason you need to look at is the fact that there haven't been that many alternatives. No real alternatives to Abe within his own party. And as regards the opposition, he's been very fortunate in facing a very fractured opposition parties, which have enabled him to win a series of landslide elections since December 2012.
What sort of man is he? I mean, what sort of personality and character does he have? And has any of that helped him stay in power for so long?
So that's an interesting factor. I mean, I'm currently in a country where you see very strong personalities coming through and prime ministers trying to use celebrity and so on. With Prime Minister Abe, you get the sense that he is maybe not such a warm character, not such a showman. He's certainly not like his predecessor, Prime Minister Koizumi. He has tried to use these kind of resources. If you look at the closing ceremony of the Olympics in Rio, he appeared dressed as Super Mario and tried to make an appearance there. But whether these things are actually successful or not, they're very difficult to gauge. But you get the sense that predecessors like Koizumi were much more comfortable using these kind of resources.
OK, listen, just to address your very, very particular area of expertise in Japan's international relations, some people say Abe is still there today, as we are in November 2019, because of his very good friendship with the United States, with Donald Trump, I should say, and many of the electorate in Japan understand how important Washington is to their own country. Is that a fair assessment?
It's a fair assessment, but Abe didn't really have a huge amount of choice when Trump was elected. I think his strategy was basically to try and get as close to Trump as possible, try and become the sort of Trump whisperer #1 in the world. You know, he was the first leader to visit Trump after the election, the second to visit Trump after the inauguration. So on the one hand, he hasn't had much choice. I think whoever was in power would have followed this strategy of getting close to America. At the same time, he's tried to offset it by balancing, trying to reset relations with China, for example, trying to sort of break into Southeast Asia a little bit more. So I think the story is probably the traditional story of reliance on the US, but not over-reliance, not wishing to get entrapped in the US's foreign policy initiatives.
Yeah, he's had a few problems sorting out a territorial dispute with Vladimir Putin. He's currently pretty much engaged in an economic war with South Korea's Moon Jae-in. Is he a good negotiator, or is he maybe a super delegator?
Yes, you can see that these problems that he's facing, these challenges that he's facing at the moment, suggests that although he's been incredibly active in foreign policy, very much sort of very visible, traveling across the world, meeting with leaders on a regular basis, giving Japan a certain visibility, they haven't actually resulted in very much. So I think if we're asking the question of where his legacy may be, I don't think it will necessarily be as a negotiator or as a delegator. I think probably we need to look at domestic politics to understand where Abe's legacy will be, and it will be in strengthening the position of the Prime Minister.
Oh, so that you think will be regarded as his greatest achievement simply in the way he's behaved in office and given the office, whatever the word might be, greater credibility or greater power. It's going to be domestic rather than international.
I think so. I think in international affairs, the legacy is slightly thin. It could all change. We've seen how rapidly relations with South Korea have degenerated. I think it's going to be with the prime ministerial position. You know, go back to December 2012, when we had the Japanese prime minister changing every year. And Abe was one of those prime ministers who changed every year as well. Since he's returned, we've seen up until now 7 years of a stable, I hate to use the phrase, strong and stable leadership.
That's okay, don't worry. We're not talking about British politics. We're talking about Japanese politics. How long do you think he might go on for?
Well, he technically is serving his third term as president of the Liberal Democratic Party, so that could take him through to 2021. So this record that's been set today is going to be a record that lasts for quite some time. It's not going to be broken anytime soon, I would imagine. There has been some talk about him possibly changing the rules again so he could serve a fourth term. I think that's probably unlikely. I think the remainder of the Abe administration is going to be focused very much on trying to get some kind of constitutional reform. And if that does happen, personally, I don't think it will happen, but if that does happen, that will be his lasting legacy.
Hugo, thank you so much. Really interesting to hear from an expert on what's going on in Japan, and Shinzo Abe's record as the longest-serving prime minister the country has had. That's Hugo Dobson from the University of Sheffield.